afternoon and welcome everybody. This would be the Jeff Cameron Show right here on 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. Good Monday, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great week. And I want to get out in front of it really quickly here as we get this hour started. First of all, I'm Jeff. That's Tom. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you guys. At J Cameron Show on X. So here's the thing. We do this every year because today is the football luncheon. So most of this show will be live. This hour will not. That's how this is. We are at the luncheon talking to Coach Norvell and his assistant coaches as this runs. It gives us time this particular hour when we record it in the morning on these days every year for the football luncheon, which, by the way, is a good thing. We can all celebrate football luncheon. It means that we've got some football to talk about here soon. But Tom and I are over there at the Moore Athletic Center, fourth floor, and, asking questions, recording interviews, and doing that kind of stuff, and listening to what Norvell has to say as he addresses the media today at the start of spring football. And then we'll make our way back over to the studio for the live 2 o'clock hour and the live 3 o'clock hour. So you get 2/3 of this sucker live. It's just that the opening hour is admittedly not. And that does cause a problem for us. We're not going to lie. Because as we sit here right now recording this morning in order to get this in before heading over to FSU, we don't know the result of the Players' Championship at Sawgrass with Rory and J.J. Spawn. And also, any number of other things could happen. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. It's what we got to do. So we'll address all of that stuff. I can openly address the corruption of the committee putting North Carolina in the NCAA tournament, who has really zero argument. But hey, okay, that's what we do these days. Corruption is king. Look around. But it is it's something how unabashedly one engages in such. But that is, you got the head of the committee is the North Carolina AD. I recused myself. Sure you did, buddy. You were in those rooms for days on end prior to recusing yourself. And, Tom, I just happened to look it up this morning because I was curious to see what the backlash would be. He gets a six-figure bonus check for North Carolina making it to the NCAA tournament. Did you see that?
Oh, what do you know? What do you know? The charmed life, the charmed existence of North Carolina, an institution that makes up classes and can skate because, well, if you were a student at the university who wasn't involved in athletics and you stumbled upon
made up classes as well,
you stumbled upon this fake African American history course and you showed up and nobody was there and you got an A, well, because it was available to you, nobody gets penalized. That's what we're dealing with here. The charmed life of North Carolina that gets a free pass into Power 2 existence because of the work we did. Must be nice to be those people.
It is weird, though. I've never quite understood it, why North Carolina would curry favor for anybody. I mean, they haven't really I don't see it. I don't understand it. Like you would think you kind of get, you don't like it, but you kind of get how Notre Dame gets favored in a lot of ways. You kind of get it, given the history. You don't like it, either do I, but you kind of get it.
It makes sense. Yeah.
And you could look at certain other institutions and you could be like, well, I can see how Michigan or Ohio State get this or that or what. North Carolina?
No, they're basically a more diversified athletic department than Georgetown. But I would look at them because people do still, as bad as that school has been and as much as my own family, we don't like Georgetown. It has its own cachet. It has its own reputation of being excellent at basketball for a long period of time.
Sure.
I think North Carolina is just a slightly better version of Georgetown, but it's talked about as though it is on the level of Notre Dame light. That couldn't be farther from the truth.
No, it's strange to me. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Hopefully you have a good day planned. I don't know. St. Patrick's Day, as you get older, is a little bit like New Year's. Like you don't want to go out on those days because it becomes, as they say, amateur hour, and it gets a little weird. But I love all things Irish, so I've got my green. I'm good head to toe today, so I'm good. And I will tip a Guinness or two this evening. You know what, Tom? I've taken your tact lately. Monday through Thursday, I'm pretty much, a teetotaler Monday through Thursday these days. There are exceptions, maybe an occasional glass of red wine or something like that with a steak, something like that, maybe. But
Yeah.
but for the most part, I just keep it between the lines. Now, Friday and Saturday, all bets are off, and whatever happens, happens. Maybe even a Sunday, but but not Monday through Thursday. But today, I will have a creamy pint of Guinness. I will.
It's the right move. It's the right move. I do like the celebrating on the proper day, not the Saturday before or the Friday adjacent.
Right.
The day has a little bit of weight to it. The one exception would be, and if we keep this whole we're waiting till after spring break thing in the football program's future, we're going to go up next year to New York for Rockaway St. Patrick's Day and take in, because that's first Saturday of March every year.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to compete with actually Manhattan proper, so they created their own day. That would be one that I would set aside away from the 17th and do something special.
I'm in. I'll go. You don't have to twist my arm, buddy. Let's go. I am absolutely in. Hey, kudos to Florida State baseball getting the series sweep over the weekend against Boston College. But I got to tell you, Tough Love Cameron made his return. I see you, Jackson West. You were garbage throughout the course of this season. And then I called out such garbage slugging percentage in the 200s, which is absurd. And my man, I know he had a couple of doubles. He had a couple of games where he was on base 3 and 4 times. Howdy. Tough Love Cameron lives. Way to get it together, Jackson West. Hey, I always say this when I'm ripping guys. It's not personal. It's not personal unless I tell you it's personal. I'll tell you when it is. I'll tell you if I hate a person. This isn't that at all. I'm just wanting the collective to have the best chance to go on a deep run out to Omaha. And there was a stretch there where I was beginning to think, and it may still be the case, one weekend does not a season make. But all right, there it is. I was a little worried that we weren't putting our best foot forward with some of those numbers. So I called it out, and my man rose to the occasion, barreling up baseballs this weekend. Good for you. Good for you, Jackson West. Good to see Tough Love Cameron still resonates with some of the guys. That's nice to know. And then, of course, Florida State starting pitching is just day after day really effing good. They really can miss bats. And then I think the other part about it is you've got a burgeoning superstar in Miles Bailey. Good to see also Max Williams kind of get it together, get back on track there, hit the ball really hard several times, including a 457-foot home run. You get to see the year that Lodis and Adam Farrow are having. That is, you had a lot of guys who you knew needed to step up coming into this season, take another step forward, and those two certainly have. So, hey, look, I it's conference play, and when you get into conference play, you talk a lot about just winning series over and over again, taking care of games in your home ballpark, and Florida State did exactly that. Got the series win, swept it, and put themselves – you give yourself a little wiggle room when you sweep ACC series, because you're going to go on the road even against middling ACC teams and have some issues. So when you can sweep one, you feel pretty good about where you're at.
It was good. You knew that they were going to be a feisty bunch, Boston College. And then when you move something up and play in a doubleheader, which in the end, I suppose they had a travel curfew, but you could have played yesterday around noon or 1 o'clock because the storm ended up moving faster through the area than we thought. But when you play a doubleheader, it's hard to win a doubleheader. That creates a higher degree of difficulty to come away with a sweep. But you're right. You step back in competition, you get a taste of what it will take to win a super regional, to win in the College World Series. When you play Florida on a Tuesday night, you take a step back. How do you psychologically react to it? You handle business on Friday. You rule the first game on Saturday. Yeah. That's exactly how you're supposed to respond in this situation. And then this week you have a compressed setup. Even though there's not a holiday that I'm aware of coming up this weekend, you got Mercer on Tuesday, but then Thursday, Friday, Saturday for Miami. You played down at what's it called down there? Light Field, Alex Rodriguez Park, whatever it is.
Alex Rodriguez Park,
yeah, exactly. So you have 3 midweek games, 3 weekday games this week. So it turns around pretty fast, and you get a rivalry series Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at Miami before you play Florida the following Tuesday. So here comes some more very good tests.
Well, and if you were worried, and you always worry if your ace misses a start in the rotation, you always kind of even in Link is very good at kind of laying bare the reasons for things. But I will tell you, seeing Jamie Arnold on almost 80 pitches look really good. I know he struck out 8, but the stuff looked good, and he didn't even try to get consistently much above 95 when he had most of his fastball stuff was 94, 95. Did end up hitting on one where he dialed it up 97. So that's good to see. Good to see. And 79 pitches. They felt comfortable enough for throwing him back out there when he had been basically, Lincoln said it was a 70 pitch count max. But those were effortless 4 innings. And so they put him back out there. And, of course, he didn't go for the full 5th, but 4 2/3 and 8 Ks. He looked good. He looked healthy and he looked strong. And I think he could have kept going.
Oh, I agree. This is a classic case of if it were the playoffs, if it were, a tournament, you would let him go. He looked fine. But you can ramp him back up. You want to act in his best interest for what happens in a few months with the draft. Makes total sense. And then just looking at the docket again, you've got a couple of interesting series on the road where you're at Miami, this weekend. Man, I was outside a lot this weekend. There's a lot of pollen out there. At Notre Dame in the dump of a town in a couple of weeks, and then Wake Forest comes to town in 3 weeks. So ramp them up as the competition ramps up in conference.
Hey, really weird side note in the opening segment where we do the kind of flyover real quick and just get started this way with touching on the news of the day and the events of the day. The cheapest team in the National Football League did something while we were asleep that shocked me. You never see the Bengals do anything close to this, but they signed Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and locked them up for 4 more years. That's it. That's all. They realized and invested big time. Now, I think I would have told T. Higgins to have a good day in the interest of signing Hendrickson, but nonetheless, they chose to go all offense. Chase agrees to a 4-year, $161 million deal. That is 112 guaranteed. By the way, the NFL has come a long way since I started this show 27 plus years ago. You would never see a contract in the NFL in which 112 out of 161 million was guaranteed. I always argued that it should be. The NFL, of all the sports, I thought should be the one where you guarantee this money for these guys because a blown knee and your career is over quick and they can cut you and you don't get a penny. So, eventually agents figured it out. Players leveraged their talent and made it work. But there it is, 112 for him. He is now, and we told you this was going to continue to happen. It was Myles Garrett last week. It's Jamar Chase today, the highest non-paid quarterback in the NFL. That is Jamar Chase, which makes a lot of sense to me. T. Higgins, meanwhile, did quite well for himself. 4 years, $115 million. That'll work. That, by the way, is probably, I think from checking, makes him the highest paid number 2 receiver in the league. So there you go. You've got your core triangle there. You've got your quarterback and your 2 superstar receivers. They are locked in. Now go get some damn offensive linemen and somebody now to rush the edge because Hendrickson comes back, but he's furious and he doesn't want to play there anymore. And now they all say that. They've got him locked up. They can play him on the franchise, and then they'll have to figure something out. I double-checked it, Tom. Remember my rule about percentage of your salary that goes towards 2 to 3 players making up the salary cap? For those 2, we're now at 44. 2 players. We're now at 44% of the salary cap in Cincinnati on 2 receivers.
That's crazy because Joe Burrow ain't 10% of the cap. So, that's a very expensive proposition. They're going to have to draft very well. The one thing I would say, as a reminder, at the end of last season, Cincinnati was one of those teams that nobody wanted a piece of. Even as bad as their defense was, nobody wanted a piece of Cincinnati. So if they can, recapture that magic and start next season like they finished this previous season with a couple of defensive draft picks, they were trending in an absolutely good direction at the end of the year. I think that's part of the reason that they made these moves. I think, frankly, too, they floated out a lot of trial balloons into the public eye, and they wanted to see what the temperature was amongst the fan base. And the fan base was for this. There's no question, because Joe Burrow was, the fan base was for these moves. It's not always the smartest thing in the world to follow what the fans want. Sometimes as a general manager, you need to be a lot more restrictive than what the fans want you to do because you're thinking of the bigger picture. But this has been their MO since Joe Burrow came into the league. You know, the question in the draft was, do you take Jamar Chase? Do you go get him offensive line help? Joe wanted the receiver. Joe got the receiver. So if Joe goes down to injury because he gets hit too much next year, and he's extremely tough and resilient, but if it happens, a lot of that's on Joe because he's always saying, you spend the money on the skill position guys.
Well, I think he's right to want to spend all the money on Jamar Chase. I mean, that dude, yeah, I wouldn't want to play anywhere else if I had Jamar Chase to throw to. Holy moly, that dude. I already loved him, but when you watch games, and I think this past year, maybe having the ticket did it for me. But they are a fun team to watch, like you're citing. They are fun to watch. Their offense is awesome. But I think just tuning in to watch the way Jamar Chase played, it became abundantly clear to me he's the best receiver in football. It's kind of not close. He's freakishly good. Nobody covers him. Nobody can cover him. It is precise, fluid route running. It is great hands. It is wheels. It's the whole effing package. I love when I watch any sport and the combatant makes the sport look like it is a child's game or just too easy when you know that it's exceedingly difficult. Like, okay, so Rory McIlroy driving a golf ball when he's right, you know, and or hitting a long iron when he's right. Your hips aren't supposed to do that. People aren't supposed to make that sound off the club and watch the ball sail that high while sustaining that distance with that beautiful draw when he wants to. It's just the dumbest thing in the world when you watch it. You go, well, that is ridiculous. The only other time that I watched something that I thought, oh, you're making this sport look entirely too easy, was when Tiger just mowed down the field, hitting stinger after stinger after stinger. And that stinger, the sound of it, Tom, remember, and the ball flight of it. I remember you and I talking like, why doesn't he just do that all the time? That's ridiculous. Like, people can't just do that on command the way that he was over and over and over again. But when people make the sport look that easy, you know, hey, listen, Shohei Ohtani does that for long stretches at a time at the plate. He'll hit everything away, 430 oppo. You try to come into his kitchen, he'll yank it down the line, pull side, 480. You go back up the gut. You go try to go up in the zone. He'll come right back up the middle. And he does all of the things. And you're like, well, and he's a monster. I mean, he's a monster of a man. So you see the relative ease with which it happens. And the ball just jumps off his bat. I think of that way lately with Skeen's pitching. You know, you got 5 pitches you can throw for strikes, all with incredible movement. And then when you feel like it, you throw 103. What are we doing here? I mean, that doesn't seem like it's a fair fight. And that's true sometimes watching Jamar Chase run against anybody trying to cover that poor bastard, especially in single coverage. You got zero chance.
Yeah, I think it's a 2-horse race, and it's a fun debate because both offenses have 2 guys. I think it's Jefferson and Chase. I think he's the only other one. And if Sam Darnold didn't crap his britches in the last couple of weeks of the season, then I think Jefferson would have made a stronger case. But if you look at targets, percentage of catches on targets, yards per, all that kind of stuff, and certainly the attention that are paid to both of those players, I think you've got a class that is a head above the rest. But then, I mean, T. Higgins can go off for 8 for 145 and 2 touchdowns on a given week, and Addison can do the same in Minnesota. But yes, if you have a nice era of football right now, generally speaking, in which you've got superstars, and I do mean superstars, at every offensive position. Usually there are eras of receivers, and we're coming out of an era where it's 80-20, 90-10, wide receiver / tight ends. You got a nice little era now, though, with Saquon Barkley and the running game in general having a nice little renaissance here. This is a nice and balanced NFL. It's about as balanced as we've had since probably the 90s in terms of star power being in different places on the field.
Yeah, my childhood was spent loving. Nobody cared. Well, I shouldn't say nobody cared. a lot of people were somewhat indifferent about your starting quarterback because you could win with a, everyman as your quarterback. I don't want to belittle these players, but Jim Plunkett, you could go to the Super Bowl and win with Jim Plunkett. Now, I know Jim Plunkett was a stud in college and Heisman, all that stuff. Jim Plunkett was kind of an everyman in the NFL. Let's not kid ourselves. He was not this elite level passer. And this happened, you would look around the league and people were winning with like Jay Schrader and stuff like that, where you're going, well, okay. But the running back carried the day. The running back was the superstar. So I love seeing the renaissance with the running back. That's that era where if you had a horse, you rode that guy 25 carries a game. Let's go.
Well, and this is where Derrick Henry's having that Hall of Famer second tier of his career, where you thought, all right, huge man, awesome, fun, maybe borderline Hall of Famer because he was one of the best when he was at Tennessee. Certainly didn't have a ton of offensive variety. But now what he did last year, rushing for nearly 2,000 yards to go along with Saquon. And I'm telling you, unfortunately, in our division, we'll see how they want to attack it because they might have their quarterback. But Bijan Robinson has a different gear to him as well, where nobody wants to tackle him. And I think he finished top 5 in rushing last year already, but he didn't have that super ceiling, that 1,800-yard season or 2,000-yard ceiling where you play the extra game. But that guy has a look to him that's just a little bit different. This is a good little era that we're in right now.
Now that we have our brackets, you might think, oh, Jeff's going to talk brackets. No, I'm going to bring it back home and talk Florida State basketball. News on that front, and it's good news. And I have to be careful, but I'll spread the good news when we come back. Jeff Cameron Show, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. So I'm not going to lie, watching, the brackets revealed, and obviously there's always controversy, and there was again this year. But beyond that, you do find yourself as a Florida State fan jealous when your team's not in it. And it's been too long, Tom. I mean, it's been 4 years. This is not it. This wandering in the wilderness for half a decade, no, sir. This will not stand. We're going to have to get it together. I'm tired of it. I know all the reasons, myriad issues. We understand. Everybody does. No. Get it together. And if you're Michael Alford, you've got to make it a point because it reflects poorly on you. This is not good. Hopefully football, what a day today is. We embark now officially on trying to heal from 2-10. Today begins the healing process from 2-10. But in the interim, there is the distraction. That is the NCAA tournament. And our non-presence, once again, has me frustrated, very frustrated. If you're an athletic department, let's not kid ourselves. You're not judged on soccer success, volleyball success. You're not judged on the tennis success. You're not judged on women's basketball. You're judged on football first, football second, football third, basketball fourth, baseball fifth. Now, in this town, if you want to reverse baseball and basketball because of fan support, I suppose you can. But if we're just talking about money-making endeavors, it's basketball than baseball. And this basketball program, damn it, man. So let's get with the getting. Now, here's the good news. My sources have told me that new head coach Luke Loucks is doing exactly what we thought he needed to do and exactly what I think he intended to do. And really probably the strength of the hire is that you're dealing with a younger coach who has a ton of connections, who will have the energy to get into the community, will have the energy to do the sit-downs and the handshakes and the dinners and the lunches and make the phone calls and send the emails and be a part of the larger fabric of the community. And that includes reaching out to the wealthiest of Florida State supporters and business owners to ensure that you have some sort of reasonable NIL budget that goes above and beyond the $1.2 million that you've been allotted which is paltry compared to what many other programs have to spend on basketball talent. I like that from day one, Luke said, look, I know I'm not going to outspend Duke or North Carolina or Kentucky or, you name it, right? Many of the SEC schools. I'm not going to outspend them for the Cooper Flags of the world. We're not going to be able to get those guys. We don't have $3 million laying around to give to one player. That's not going to work. So I'm going to have to find value-added guys. I'm going to have to find guys that kind of will help make up the style of play that I want to promote, that will have an interest in working into what I can give them, which is obviously access to an awful lot of player development programs within the NBA. Obviously, my expertise in how those organizations are run, along with my connections to a lot of those organizations, a lot of those coaches, a lot of those evaluators, and a lot of, frankly, assistants as well and agents. So he's going to have to tap into those resources, and he's going to have to tap into extra money that he is able to raise through whatever shared vision he can sell to those that care deeply about Florida State. And there are plenty of people out there who I think maybe we're not always reached out to, we're not always connected with, we're not always made to feel special. There was a very small group that made up the support for Florida State basketball in the past. And I think you could get away with it for a very long time when the system was different than the one that is run now. What draws and succeeds in college basketball now is different than it was 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And so I think the younger you go, which they did, and the more connected you go, and the more, I suppose, community involved and engaged you go with your coaching hire, the better off you are. There may be drawbacks. There are drawbacks to some of that. Inexperience coaching at this level is one, and it's a trade-off. It is a huge trade-off that you say, well, for what Luke lacks here, he might possess here, and we hope the marriage of these two things work out in time, that he ends up sustaining something of excellence and has a chance at a second contract, and Florida State's program begins to buzz. And at that point, you have a little bit more money in the coffers. We get out the other side of the situation that Florida State finds themselves in, which is, again, dumping huge amounts of money into facilities, into football, into the coaching staff, into NIL for football, you name it. Obviously, football only facility, stadium, lawsuit, all of it. When you get out the other side of that, hopefully by then, Florida State basketball has become something that the university feels strongly about investing in because they've had success on the court. But in the interim, you have to have a coach who's doing what I hear took place over the last several days since the hire, and that is the reaching out and the securing of funds from places that maybe in the past weren't always the ones that you could utilize for that sort of resource money. So now hearing that over the weekend, learning more about where this program is headed financially, learning more about where this is headed in terms of potential, the raising of money deepens the pot is a better way of saying it, and gives you a chance. We're going to hear about these coaching hires to make up his staff. I am told that this is going to be a staff full of recruiters, guys who have great connections. And, basketball, it's crazy. It's long considered to be, before the modern era where now you can openly pay for play, basketball was always considered the dirtiest of sports. And there were just so many tentacles and connections and webs and AAU. And, I know this guy in Atlanta who's friends with this guy here, and he'll steer you players from this school, which is a powerhouse AAU program. Oh, you got to know this guy in South Florida. You got to know this guy in the Midwest. If you can connect the dots there, maybe everybody works together. They all make a little bit of money on the kickback from the agencies and all that. That's how it all worked. You got to have somebody who has those connections. And now you can just do it on the up and up. And I think this is probably Luke's strength, is that those connections hopefully pay dividends here as he also works hard to put together this staff and announces what that's going to look like. I already know some of the names. You're also going to have somebody there that's within, a really good basketball operations guy. You're going to need somebody within the program there to help run things behind the scenes, that shares your vision, that gets it, that understands. I think that's in the process of taking place. So we hit the ground running with the new basketball coach. This is the sort of buzz and enthusiasm you would hope to hear about after a hire. And, it didn't take long, and I was hoping that it wouldn't, because you don't have long. And Luke referred to that in his press conference, noting that, look, the portal doesn't wait on anybody. You got to get moving here. And on a day in which we start turning our attention back to football, it's nice to know that behind the scenes, it does look like basketball is quickly organizing, coming together to try to get this thing turned around. I don't know what will happen in year one. Nobody does. I don't know what kind of players he's going to be able to bring in. I don't know how many of the current players he wants to retain. I don't know how quickly we'll learn with the naming of the staff who's what. But I do know that they hit the ground running this past week and into the weekend, which is really good news.
Well, this was clearly going to be a job that you have to think outside the box in order to succeed at Florida State. You have to. And this is why we wanted somebody who was intimately acquainted with what it is in Tallahassee. And, to me, while Sam Cassell has tons of name recognition and connection to the program, I don't know how in contact he was with Leonard Hamilton and Florida State as a basketball program over the last 10, 15 years to understand, what it would take. Now, Charlton Young, CY, very much would understand and know what it takes to succeed at Florida State. But Luke certainly did. So, to me, the two finalists were CY and Luke.
I agree with that.
For people who were armed with the knowledge of what they would need to do in order to get Florida State to be competitive. And I'm glad that it sounds like that Luke is off to a good start here because you were always going to have to heavy lift in a fundraising department as the head coach. Some coaches hate that so much and are so stubborn that they believe that they can coach their way past a lack of resources. And to a degree, you're going to have to do that here. But you're also going to have to put your salesman hat on. When Luke called donors minority owners, I knew that he was going to prioritize it in such a way that he was going to take it completely seriously. Just that use of terminology is so on point of where we are right now in college sports. I get that the House settlement is going to put you in a place where $22 million is going to get siphoned off and distributed to athletes. I get that we're in that era. But you're still going to have to go outside of that fund, especially in a secondary sport or a tertiary sport like basketball is in the Florida State athletics hierarchy. So that he isn't, excuse me, my throat. If he isn't above that, if he doesn't act like, oh, I'm above all that, we'll have somebody else do that. It is critical that that's the kind of hire you have. Bring in recruiters. It sounds like he's saying to his staff and the operation, I'm going to recruit the money. Y'all recruit the players, and I'm going to coach the players. That is a nice way to handle this. I think that was one of the strengths of Jimbo 1.0. Nearly killed him, and he was a really good recruiter, even when he was talking with just 17 and 18-year-olds and an evaluator of talent. But you could tell. He's like, I'm going to run the operation. Y'all go get me the kids, and we'll figure it out. You have to make decisions like that, because there's no clean path to success here. You have to do something where you're taking on a second or a third job and there aren't enough hours in the day. And Luke is the right age to do that.
Well, I think you're right. And I think it's also important to note, look, when they hired Luke, my view of that situation was that Luke would be the guy that handled all the X's and O's. Some coaches you bring in, they better have a crack assistant. A guy that is an elite X's and O's guy, because the coach is more of a CEO. The coach is running the big picture. Maybe he's doing the recruiting because he's got the name, whatever it might be. He's able to fundraise. But in-game decision-making, obviously, week to week, the game planning, whatever it might be, sometimes you turn that over to an assistant. Then there's the opposite. The head coach, that is the guy. The head coach that is, I am an X's and O's guy. I will scout. I will do the scout for every opponent. I'll call all the plays. They're in game that we're going to run. I've got this. You just do a good job of finding me some players, damn it, like you're describing. or you just do this, this, and this, whatever it might be. So Luke was always going to be the guy coming off an NBA bench, having coached NBA, being the head coach in an NBA summer league. You can't do that if you don't understand the game. They're not going to listen to you. These are pros.
Yep.
When you're a player development guy, you're in with coaches watching film. The X's and O's, especially when you're doing it when you work for freaking Steve Kerr, and then you're working in Sacramento, and come on, who are we kidding? So Luke was always going to be the X's and O's guy, which is good to hear. Right? Get those other guys doing whatever else. My coach can handle the X's and O's on game day.
What's interesting to me is that it just in this situation where Florida State is, do you go get a bunch of salesman types for assistant coaches that can recruit players, like your Ferrari salesman and scent of a woman? Like somebody who's fast talking, smooth. They go, man, you're good. Or do you get instead guys who can really evaluate and scout? Because I wonder, you're going to have to find these guys, the ones that are going to fit here, the ones that are going to fit under a certain price point. And yes, you're going to have to recruit them, but what type of operation it's a $1.7 million budget for his staff,
right,
like his whole operation. It's not like that's the assistant salary pool, and then you've got this other thing for basketball operations. I think it's 1.7, totally encompassing the operation.
Yeah, the kit and caboodle, yeah.
Right. Well, scouting has to be a big part of that, because those top flight 4- and 5-star kids from the On3 rankings, you aren't getting those guys. So where do you find those ones? Is that going to be Luke's job because of his connections in the industry? Or do you bring in an assistant or two that understand how to go mine for and find those kids? And then maybe one of the other assistants is the one that can close and go get the kid.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and we'll learn more in the coming days. And these are conversations that I want to have personally with Luke. If I'm being frank on the show here, I'd like to talk to him about these things. I think I'll have the opportunity when he gets a chance to exhale. Right now, he's putting together a staff. He's saying thanks to the old staff. He's moving his stuff in. He's getting the staff put together. I'm sure he's already talking to high school coaches. I know this. This is a guy who alluded to the fact that he had 150 or 110 voicemails from coaches all across the country wanting to be part of this staff. That included a ton of guys within the state. And he said, quote unquote, you owe them all the time of day. You have to get back to all of them, regardless if you're hiring them or not, which I think is great. That speaks to connections within the state. So there's a whole lot of talking to coaches throughout this state.
Yeah, exactly. This is the classic case of, we've seen these meetings in what we've done for a living.
Yeah.
Who you got? Who's in your black book, to use a term from decades ago?
Yeah, Rolodex,
who's in the Rolodex? Who can you just call? And that, I would believe that would be one of the parameters of the interview. Like, all right, you know what you know, but who do you know? And who can you get me every year? Who is picking up your phone call before somebody else calls in this conference? Like, who's picking up because you are calling? That's actually probably a fun part to be a fly on the wall for.
Ooh, exhausting too. It's just step by step by step by step. Man, it's got to be rough at some point. Jeff Cameron Show, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. Mentioned it a moment ago, but it is almost surreal to sit here and think that today does start. Today we embark on, again, recovering from 2-10. And it all begins this week as FSU spring football gets underway. The luncheon going on right now, which a reminder here as we round out hour one, this hour had to be recorded. We are at the Moore Athletic Center with the coaches. We've heard from Mike Norvell by now, and we're talking with the assistant coaches, Tony White, Gus Malzahn, and others. I'll have my annual interview with Tony Tokars, who I love talking to, and kind of an interesting job for him at present as he deals with a quarterback that is sort of a non-traditional quarterback and an offense that's changing, at least where they put the emphasis within the offense. So different way of coaching quarterback for him, I would think. But the point would be Wednesday we get underway. There's a Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday sort of deal. Friday's pro day. We don't know as we sit here right now the access situation. We'll have answers for you here coming up, because next hour is live. Tom and I are making our way back to the studio right now as this runs. This was used as a buffer hour. We do this every year. The 3 o'clock hour will also be live. So if you're watching this and listening to this, just know coming up, Tom and I will be in studio to react to what we've heard from the head coach and his new assistants. And of course, some of the old assistants as well. And we'll get a sense of what spring's going to look like, what that schedule is going to be like. I just find this fascinating. This is the beginning where you kind of go all the way back and you think about the things that were said a year ago prior to the season beginning, prior to fall camp, and prior to the first game. And then you remember, what stood out, the things that rang true, the things that did not, the things that turned out to be unequivocally false, the things that succeeded. It's the first time, I think, maybe ever, that I've gone into a spring football luncheon with Mike Norvell in which you enter that luncheon with the understanding that not a single thing that was mapped out the previous year's luncheon came to pass. Not one thing that was either touted or thought to be a strength or a highlight of any kind turned out to be accurate. All of what we thought in the media, all of what they thought as a coaching staff, in particular the head coach, turned out to be turned upside down, on its head, turned out to be, you can argue, the worst season in program history. And now how do they respond to having that kind of a season? You look nationally as these spring football camps get underway, and you take a cursory glance at the headlines for all of the other programs that are part of the greater fabric of college football, the big names in the sport, and you'll get a lot of, they had to replace their quarterback, this assistant coach left for a better job, they brought in this coach, and then just sort of these surface level discussions about whether or not year over year they can sustain a 9-win, 10-win campaign. Are they going to take the next step? Whatever it might be. But only Florida State's talking points are this disparate, where it is doom and gloom to, hey, maybe they'll bounce back and win the conference again. It's like that range of topics really only follows Florida State, because nobody else that we've ever seen have gone from 12-0 to 2-10. So you don't know how to discuss them. And you can hear the talking heads, the people that cover college football. They're all, I don't know. Either Mike Norvell is going to take another big step forward back into good graces and give himself a chance to be here long term, or he's going to have another bad season and be shown the door. That's a wide range to happen so quickly as we enter spring. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a modern range too. This is where, if you're talking about things that can happen in this era of college football, Florida State and the bingo card, they've hit almost all of them, save for a non-invite into the invitational itself.
Yeah,
but both good and bad. The tenor he decides to take today, I find it interesting, maybe reading into it too much. But if you're going with history, Mike Norvell has been extremely consistent in his policies, in the way he goes about every day. It's one of his strengths. I think that's how they got out of 0-4 the way they did, was he didn't change course. In this instance, he's going to have to change some things. And clearly he already has with the coaching staff underneath him. But last year when they communicated what the schedule was going to be, like, we don't even have the practice dates officially. Like, we kind of know what the practice schedule is, but we don't even have the schedule of what days they're practicing yet officially from Florida State on the day of the luncheon. That's never happened before. Usually there's an availability schedule. We don't have that one. It's never been this late. So it tells me that some kind of material changes are coming. Interesting. How he delivers the tone of what things are going to be different is going to be very telling to me about how he's internalized the last few months of his life, not just as head coach, but of his life.
Well, and in that way, it's the most intriguing of these luncheons besides the first one that he ever had. This is the most intriguing one since that first one. So we're looking forward to talking about it with you. We'll start next hour because we'll have a reaction to it as we make our way back. Jeff Cameron Show continues in a moment. 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV.